Top story this second hour of Morning Joe is a group of Senate Republicans pushing to fund the construction of President Trump's 90,000 square foot ballroom using taxpayer money. Who would be surprised by this? The effort is being led by Senator and close Trump ally Lindsey Graham, who said yesterday he wants Congress to pass legislation that would provide $400 million for the ballroom's construction, citing security concerns in the wake of the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting.
Underneath this ballroom will be infrastructure that is national security centric. The ballroom itself will avoid the dilemma of having to leave the White House grounds with future presidents and this president's to go downtown in a place that's less secure. I'd like to vote as soon as possible to accelerate what America needs, a secure facility for the president and others to meet in, to have a good time, to enjoy themselves without putting the nation at risk.
All right, this is preposterous. First of all, a federal judge has stopped construction of the ballroom, but has allowed them to move forward with the underground secure location. So to make sure that there are no questions about whether stopping the Marie Antoinette Memorial Ballroom has anything to do with national security. It will not. That's the first thing. The second thing that is preposterous is the fact that they're saying, oh, well, you know, we need this ballroom because things have gotten so dangerous out there. They have. I've expressed concerns. Mika and I have said time and time again, it's preposterous, and they can never again have so many cabinet members and the president, the vice president of the United States in one place that is not as secured as the United States Capitol.
As decided by the Trump White House.
And the Hilton is not secure. It's just not secure. I'm not going to go into the details of all the things that Iran could have done to push back. It doesn't take an imagination to figure that out, but it would have been very easy to do. So they cannot go back to the Hilton. It is a national security risk. That said, building the Marie Antoinette Ballroom is not the reaction to that. On keeping things more secure. You have to find better locations. So you could
make better decisions about security at that event.
At that event.
Through the administration, which put it at a lower level.
I've got to say,
Hegseth, Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, the President of the United States, Kash Patel, all in the same room? Are you kidding?
Scott Bessent in an old hotel that just wasn't secure. Other Republicans also less enthusiastic about the Lindsey plan, among them Senators Rand Paul, Josh Hawley, Rick Scott, and others who say private funding is the right way to go. And Senator Scott said, we have a $39 trillion debt. Maybe we ought to stop spending money. So far, the only Democrat, John Fetterman, has come out in favor of the project. But, you know, John Lemire, how do you sit back and talk about security when the Washington Post is reporting that they actually had less security at this dinner by choice, by the White House's choice, than they should have had? I mean, we're at a stage now where the stakes are so much higher, especially after all of the blunders in Butler, Pennsylvania, which I must say still baffle me. I'm still stunned by the mistakes of Butler, Pennsylvania. And I'm still surprised what happened at the Hilton the other night. But you look at drone warfare. You look at all the other capabilities that we've seen break out in the Ukraine-Russia war. We are going to have to take a second look at not only what events we do, but how we run our national campaigns, how we secure presidential candidates, how we secure audiences for presidential candidates, because the whole world has changed. But that said, all of these Republicans blindly following the talking points the White House put out right after the shooting is really a bit insulting, and even some Republicans are calling that out. Yes, we need the president safe. We need the president secure. That does not mean we need to blindly throw taxpayer money at this time at one of the president's pet projects.
Yeah, and let's just be clear about a couple of things. Even if the ballroom existed now, The White House Correspondents' Dinner would not be there. It is not a White House event. It's a different organization. And there are questions about the coziness of that weekend to begin with, but that's a line that would never be crossed. The Correspondents Association is not going to hold its event in a government building, particularly the White House, the man that, who they cover, his home. That's just not going to happen. Secondly, the president has actually said repeatedly, there have been questions about it, but that the ballroom would be funded with private money. Has not asked, at least not publicly, for government funding on this. But now Senator Graham is seemingly eager to give him that. And this isn't going to happen, though. Enough Republicans have already come out against it. This seems like a non-starter. It's Lindsey Graham currying favor with the commander-in-chief. But Willie, it does just speak again, though, to as Joe was saying, the blind loyalty from so many Republicans that also makes them, we keep coming back to this theme, seem out of touch. Why is this your priority? Why are you focused on a ballroom? The national security argument is nonsense. Why are you doing that as opposed to doing things that actually improve voters' lives?
And in the immediate aftermath, presumably a traumatic event, standing in your tuxedo in the briefing room and going right to this issue, talking about the ballroom. It's not surprising, of course, that Senator Graham is carrying water for President Trump. That seems to be his job. But the question is, are they all saying, is Lindsey Graham saying, is the president saying the president's never going to leave the White House again? Because, of course, there are security questions anytime he leaves the White House to go anywhere. Do they want to create a bubble where he goes from the residence to the Oval and then occasionally at night over to the ballroom? That seems to be what they're saying, rather than saying, hey, let's have this event at a more secure place when we do it in the future. Let's bring in contributing writer to The Atlantic, Eugene Robinson, and politics bureau chief and senior political columnist at Politico, Jonathan Martin. J. Mart, let's start with you on this. Just your reaction to what happened on Saturday night, and also now this conversation about the ballroom. As Joe said, the talking points almost verbatim went out from a group of supporters of the president, politicians, podcasters, with the same phrase, we must have the ballroom. Effectively, if you don't think we should have a ballroom now, you hate America and you hate the president.
Yeah, I can't say it's the most profound call for justice in the history of the Western world. We must build the ballroom now. What do we want? The ballroom. When do we want it? Tomorrow. I can't really hear the chant, but I think something that's sort of being forgotten here is the American taxpayer is not crying out to subsidize the D.C. banquet circuit in perpetuity. I think people forget this. You build a ballroom on the White House grounds. Guess what? You're going to have to pay for the grounds crew, for the wait staff, for the security. Are you telling me that the American taxpayer for decades to come is going to be on the hook for every damn D.C. fancy dinner? I can't think of anything that the American voter would like less than subsidizing the press and politicians for putting on black tie and partying together in D.C. That probably would test it like 397 if I had to guess, Willie. So I think this is not that well thought through. But understandably, I think there's an instinct to try to find a way to create some better security measures in light of what happened on Saturday night. It clearly, in hindsight, is regrettable that you had the entire government in one room, given the threat there and given the lack of security around the Hilton. I'm just skeptical that the answer is having taxpayers subsidize a series of events for decade and decade in which D.C. elites are going to put on black tie and hang out. Doesn't seem to me to be a good use of taxpayer money.
Yeah, and Gene, I don't think the White House Correspondents Press Association would do this anyway. They wouldn't accept that there was going to be some kind of event at the White House.
No, they wouldn't. They would never have the event at the White House. And I don't think
the president would like this. The president likes getting out around the country. So what, you're going to keep the president confined to the White House compound for the whole of his 4-year tenure in order to ensure 100% guaranteed security? You can't do that if you have a president, and any presidents want to go out and travel around the country.
You can't do that. What you could do, for example, is at least put the highest security designation on an event like the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where when you know it's at the Hilton, which everyone knows is not a really secure place. No. I mean, there are so many entrances and exits. It's very difficult to manage that space. So I would have thought that it would certainly have rated the highest security designation. I don't understand how that happened. And so we need to know that. The ballroom is just a complete boondoggle to begin with. Number one, I think it's not needed at all. You don't need a huge ballroom at the White House. I think one of the charms and one of the great things about the White House is its lack of that kind of grandeur, and the fact that it's a house. And it has a big room where you can have a dinner. You know, I went to one state dinner, and it was under Obama, and it was a state dinner for China. They did it inside the White House itself, in the East Room. There were about 200 people there. If you can do a state dinner for China inside the building, you could do a state dinner for anybody inside the building. You don't need this huge Marie Antoinette appendage, yet he's determined to have it.
You know, Caddy, there's so many things you could actually help us on here. First of all, you talk about the ongoing battle with British taxpayers, complaining about the upkeep for Buckingham Palace, the upkeep for all of the royal residences. The upkeep, that's something that the British taxpayers have had 1,000 years to get used to. Americans, not so much. This, I think, will be an ongoing problem here. Secondly, though, the royalty does have Buckingham Palace. And yet, King Charles, obviously, as we know, gets out of it. And he goes to places that have to be secured. Queen Elizabeth II constantly was going out and doing ribbon cuttings, doing garden parties. And by the way, they were active targets of the IRA for decades. I mean, you look at what happened to Lord Mountbatten. They constantly were under attack by the IRA. So it's not like, oh, the royals, nobody would want to kill them. No, there was people actively wanted to kill them all the time. But they didn't just build a palace and stay inside there. And this idea, this Republican idea that somehow Donald Trump is going to be like a king, they're going to build a ballroom and he will be forever secure, is just nonsense. It is a false choice, isn't it?
Yeah. This is the moment where I'm allowed to gratuitously mention that I was at the garden party yesterday at the British Embassy for the King and Queen.
Exactly.
Show the picture. Yeah.
And then,
show the picture.
But the security, you had the King and Queen of Great Britain at a garden party with 600 people, fully outdoors. I'm sure there was security, but it wasn't a security that felt oppressive in any way. We had our bags checked briefly. We had our IDs checked. And the whole thing went off as planned. But imagine if the King and Queen couldn't do that visit. Imagine if a president couldn't do what the president wants to do because for some reason you want to guarantee his absolute security and so they're never allowed to leave some hermetically sealed bubble. I mean, there's a risk with these people being remote from their publics as it is. I mean, there's a risk from the king being remote from his people. There's a risk of a president not being in touch with his people. If you try to guarantee, you cannot guarantee 100% security for any principal unless, you stick them in a room and never let them leave.
Was the Ted Cruz photobomb of that picture planned, Caddy? Because it was a
good, wasn't it?
Great Ted Cruz shot behind you.
I took Ted Cruz Lutnick.
Was that AI or was that real?
No.
Look, there he is. You can see him.
I'm not a journalist for nothing. I knew he was standing behind me. I liked, and Lutnick was there too.
Oh, Howard Lutnick's right there too.
Queuing for a long time to shake hands with the monarch. May I just say?
Hey, J.
Love
Mart.
us still.
Yeah, Mike.
We like to think not.
J. Mart, I have a question for you, and for anybody who can answer this question. I've never had it answered, and I've asked it several times with regard to the ballroom. How is it that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, got away with literally overnight destroying the White House, tearing down the White House? It's not his house. It doesn't belong to him. It belongs to the American taxpayers. And yet nobody has really said anything. I've seen larger projects and smaller projects from state to state tied up by the courts, and they never happen. How is it that this has happened?
Because he can. Is the short answer. The longer answer is because the law is somewhat vague on this, and he's not going to wait for the vagaries of the law. He's going to start the construction, which is what he did. I think there were plenty of folks in Congress who didn't like it. They weren't sure what they could do, but it was too late once the bulldozers came in, and there wasn't much they could do about it. Look, I think part of the challenge with not having either chamber of Congress, Mike, is that you can't use the appropriations process. As Joe knows, when you pass the annual spending bills, you oftentimes can pass these riders to the bills in which no money shall be spent for this purposes. And I think if Democrats had at least one chamber of Congress, you certainly would have seen an effort to amend the spending bills for the federal government to block any use of federal dollars to dynamite the East Wing, and they couldn't get that through. They don't have a majority in either chamber of Congress, obviously. Now, what's interesting, guys, is if Democrats do have the Congress next year, I'm sure you will see an effort in spending bills beginning in 2027 to bar any federal dollars for fill in the blank, the new ballroom, the Arc de Triomphe, any kind of anything related to Trumpian grandeur. I assume Democrats in Congress are going to try to block.
Yeah, and just to Mike's question, by the way, remember that Trump lied. He said, we're not going to tear anything down, right? He said, we're going to be construction, but we're not going to destroy anything. And then, almost in the dead of night, he just tore down the East Wing. And it was a fait accompli. By the time anybody knew what was happening, the machines had torn down half the building.
Like the Colts leaving Baltimore in the middle of the night.
Exactly.
He
He pulled an Irsay.
Exactly.